A man with money in the bank, no mortgage, and a job he could walk away from on Friday is getting called a failure right now by men who are 4 payments behind on a truck they bought, so the neighbors would see it in the driveway. A growing number of men are doing some version of what that man is doing. They know exactly how to get the standard life. They watch their fathers get it. They are turning it down on purpose. What they're turning down is a specific offer. Work every hour you can until you're 50. Borrow for the house, borrow for the ring, borrow for the second car. Married by 30, kids by 34. Buy the things that show people you're doing well. In exchange, you get respect, a family that stays, and a stretch at the end where you finally enjoy what you built. Men are looking at that offer and walking away from it. This lands on you whether you took the offer or not. If those men are reading it right, the extra shifts you picked up this month are buying you something you never checked the price on. If they're reading it wrong, you want to know that before your son is 23 and standing in your kitchen asking what he should do with his life, the generation ahead of them ran the whole route and finished it. 40 years of work, the house, the marriage, 2 or 3 kids, retirement at 65. The results are visible now. Young men grew up inside those results, in those houses, at those dinner tables, watching what 4 decades of doing everything right actually produced in a man's face. Some of it produced exactly what it promised. Plenty of those men are fine and would run it again. But a large number of sons watch their father come home at 7, eat, fall asleep in a chair with the television on, get up at 5, and do it again for 30 years, and then watched him lose half of it in a courtroom he never expected to sit in, at 54 with a lawyer he borrowed money to pay. The offer used to come with guarantees attached to it. One income covered a house on a normal wage. The company that hired you at 22 was often still there when you were 60, and it paid you a pension for the rest of your life, whether the stock market cooperated or not. The marriage had a whole town holding it in place. Those guarantees came off the table one at a time, and not much came in behind them. The house takes 2 incomes on the same street where one used to do it. The company reorganizes and your role disappears in an email at 11 in the morning. The retirement account rides whatever the market does that decade. The marriage is held in place by 2 people and nothing else. You already know this if you've priced a house in the last 3 years. Go find out what the place you grew up in sold for the year your parents bought it. Then look at what it goes for now and what your father earned then against what you earn now. A man who runs that comparison usually stops arguing about whether the deal changed. So the same effort buys less than it used to. Plenty of men concede that in about 10 seconds. What they do with it is where they split. A man can know the deal got worse and sign anyway, because everyone he knows signed, and because saying no out loud sounds like an excuse. A lot of men sign, some of them read the rest of it first, watch what that second group actually does with their money and their hours, because it settles most of the arguments about them. They put a fixed share of every paycheck into an account before they spend anything. They drive a car that's paid for and 11 years old. They rent a place smaller than they can afford. They pick up a skill that pays, welding, code, HVAC, whatever the shortage is where they live. They run in the morning, they fish, they build things, they play something badly and get better at it. They keep 3 or 4 friends they see regularly. They take a week off and go somewhere and post no photographs of it afterward, and a lot of them hit 40, owing nobody anything, with a number in an account that grows whether they show up that week or not. That is a man building capacity. Most of that list makes him harder to pressure. Money in the account means he can quit a manager who talks to him a certain way. A trade in his hands means the town he lives in is a choice. Nothing owed means a bad month stays a bad month instead of turning into a crisis. Work is the biggest single thing being declined, and the arithmetic on it is worth saying out loud. A man selling 40 years at 50 hours a week is selling roughly 100,000 hours of his life. He gets money for them. What he's told he also gets is a career, an identity, and a place where he belongs. Ask a man who was let go at 51 after 19 years how much of that second list survived the phone call. And the men over 50 in his life have a name for what he's doing. They say he's dressing up failure. They say he couldn't hold a woman, so he decided he never wanted one. They say he couldn't handle the pressure of a real career, so he built a philosophy out of leaving early. They say the whole thing is a story a man tells himself after he loses. That charge lands on some men, and it should be said plainly. There is absolutely a version of this where a guy who can't get hired and can't get a date announces that he's opted out of a game he was never in. That man exists. You know one. He's 29, he's angry at women he's never met, and he has $300 to his name. The two men get told apart by their accounts and their calendars. Both of them can say similar sentences about opting out. Only one of them has 11 months of expenses saved. Only one has a certification he didn't have a year ago. Only one turned down overtime on Saturday because he had something else he cared about doing and had spent years building a Saturday worth protecting. A man who failed at the standard life often has less than he started with. His savings go down. His skills stay flat. His body gets worse. His friends thin out. That's what losing looks like, and it's easy to spot from outside. The men we're talking about are gaining ground on most of those lines at the same time. Nobody does that by accident while collapsing. There's a second half to the accusation, and it's the harder one. People say these men are lying about the family, that underneath the savings rate and the fishing rod is a guy who'd take a wife and 2 kids tomorrow. That one is half right, and the half it gets right does less work than people think. A lot of these men do want the family. What they stopped doing is buying it on the schedule, in the order, and at the price they were handed by everyone around them. The old arrangement held together because the whole life came in one piece: companionship, a household, children, sex, a place in the town, someone to sit with you when you're sick, an answer when another man asked what you do. It arrived together, and getting one part usually meant taking all of it. Those pieces came apart over the years. A man can live alone now and eat well. He can have a full week of company without being married to anyone. He can get status from work he actually likes. And once the pieces come separately, a man finds out which of them he was ever paying for. Given the parts separately, a lot of men buy about 3 of the 10. They want the woman and the children. They don't want the 60-hour job, the house at the top of what the bank approved, the truck, the wedding that eats a year of savings, or the version of himself he had to keep up at his own dinner table. The whole package is what people are really defending when they call these men failures. Nobody is upset that a 34-year-old has savings. What bothers people is that he has savings, no debt, and doesn't appear to be missing anything because the arrangement was easier to carry when everybody around you was carrying it too. The audience changed size on top of everything else. Your grandfather's audience was one street, one church, and the men at his plant. He could satisfy it with a decent lawn and a car that started every morning. Now the audience is everyone a man has ever met, plus a few thousand strangers, all of them posting the best day of their year, and no lawn on earth satisfies that. A man can spend his entire earning life aiming at a target that moves out another few feet every time he closes on it. Some men see that at 30 and stop shooting. The men still shooting call that quitting. The man who stopped has his weekends back and exactly the same amount of admiration he had before, which was never very much to begin with. What fills the space is smaller and harder to photograph. A man gets good with his hands. He learns an instrument well enough to be unembarrassing about it. He knows every trail around his town. He fixes the thing that breaks instead of paying somebody to come out on a Thursday. Not much of that impresses a stranger, and it belongs to him in a way a truck payment never did. That's a real trade with real losses on the other side of it. A man who takes it gives things up. He won't have the story about the big house. Some women will pass on him for exactly that reason, and he knows it when he chooses. He'll sit through family dinners where his life gets treated as a phase he hasn't outgrown. He made that call with his own accounts open in front of him. There's something heavier underneath all of it, and it comes from the men over 50. They say it in a parking lot at the end of a shift to a younger guy they like, usually right after something went sideways at home or at work. They almost never say it at their own dinner table, and rarely with their wives in the room. The sentence is some version of, "Don't do what I did." Or, "If I were your age, I'd hold on to my money and see what happens." Or the short one, said flat, the way a man says something he finished thinking about years ago. "I gave them everything, and I'm not sure any of them ever noticed." That's the heaviest thing on the table here, and it doesn't come from young men at all. It comes from the ones who completed the route. They did every step in the right order. They have the house, the grown children, the retirement, the photographs on the wall. And a meaningful share of them, talking honestly to a younger man with nobody else listening, advise against it. You can wave off a 28-year-old savings account as fear. It's much harder to wave off a 61-year-old who did everything right and would tell his own son to do it differently. That man has no reason to lie to anybody. He isn't selling a thing. He already paid in full, and he's telling you what came back. The obvious reply is that this is the regret of men who chose badly. Wrong woman, wrong job, wrong town. Do it right, and it works fine. There's something to that. Plenty of men chose well and would run the whole thing again tomorrow. But listen closely to what the regretful ones actually name when they explain themselves. What they name is usually the years. They talk about the shifts they picked up to cover a payment on something nobody needed. They talk about the decade when they saw their kids on weekends because the work was in another city. They spent 30 years buying things for an audience that turned out to be about 4 people, 2 of whom are dead now. That's the report these younger men are getting, and they're getting it early enough to do something with it. Their fathers came into that information at 58, standing in a driveway that was no longer theirs. These men got it at 26, from a father who wasn't trying to teach them anything and didn't know they were listening. Think about the last thing you bought that came with a payment schedule attached. Before you signed for it, can you name the person whose face came up when you pictured owning it? If a name arrives inside of 2 seconds, there was a second party to that purchase, and he isn't helping with the payments. That question is where a lot of a man's money actually goes. A man doesn't work 6 days because he loves the 6th one. He works it because a number has to be hit every month, and that number was set by a house he chose partly for the street it sits on, and a car he chose partly for the parking lot at work. Decide those same things with nobody else in the room, and the shape of a life changes fast. The house gets smaller and closer to the work. The car gets older. The wedding runs 1/10 of what it was going to run. The hours needed to hold all of it up drop by 1/3, sometimes by half. That's 10 years of a man's life handed back to him. 10 years is what gets skipped over when people call this giving up. Those 10 years are the actual thing being bought here. A man doing this wants a great deal out of his life. He wants to know what each piece costs him before he agrees to carry it, and he wants the ones he keeps to be his own choice, rather than the schedules. A man holding those years can start a family at 38 with money behind him, a trade in his hands, and a body that still works, and give that family more of himself than he could have at 26. With a mortgage and a manager. That version rarely gets counted because it's slow and it doesn't announce itself. A man living it looks unimpressive for about a decade. No house, no ring, no title anyone at a party recognizes. Then he has a paid-off place, a skill people call him for, and 40 hours a week he controls at an age when the men who did it in order are exhausted and refinancing. Some of the people calling this failure have something riding on it, and mostly they've never thought about it that way. A boss with a crew that has payments to cover gets easier scheduling, whether he intends that or not. A bank writes a 30-year term and prices it, expecting 30 years. Parents want grandchildren while they're still young enough to enjoy them. Those are ordinary incentives, not a plot, and none of it makes the advice wrong. A man taking advice about his life should just know which interest is doing the talking. Your father telling you to buy the bigger house may be completely right. He's also the man who bought the bigger house, and it's human to want company in a decision you already made. Marriage takes the loudest version of the cowardice charge, and it works the same way as everything else on the list. A wedding creates a contract with rules about money and time with the children that are written down and public. Any man can read them beforehand. A 30-year mortgage is the same kind of document. Men who read the terms first or build the money before they take them on are behaving the way people behave about every other serious commitment. You'd read a lease on a storage unit. The odd part was signing the biggest ones at 23 because the calendar said it was time, which is where the word failure stops fitting. Failure is a man who wanted something, went after it, and came back holding less than he left with. These men end up with more money, more skills, more hours, and more say over who gets their Saturday than most of the men calling them names. That's a man ahead of where he started, whatever anybody wants to call it. What they did was ask a question their fathers were rarely given room to ask out loud, and they asked it about each item separately. What do I actually need this one for? It's a real question, and the answers come out different item by item. A lot of the answers are honest ones. A man needs money coming in, and enough of it saved that nobody owns his Monday. He needs work he's good at, because being good at something is what respect is actually made out of. He needs a few people who take his call at 2 in the morning. He needs a body that isn't falling apart at 45. And several items have no answer at all once you ask directly. The truck has no answer. The house at the top of the approval has no answer. The 40 extra hours have no answer once the payments they cover are gone. The wedding with 140 guests has no answer that survives the question being asked twice. You can run this on your own life this week, and it costs you nothing to find out. Pull up your recurring payments. Take the 3 biggest ones after food and rent. For each one, try to name the person whose opinion was in the room when you decided on it. If a name arrives fast, that item was never yours. You've been renting somebody's approval, and the rent comes due monthly. Cancel one of them, the one whose name arrived fastest. Then watch 2 things over the next 3 months. How many hours you have to work to stay even, and how many people actually notice it's gone. The second number may be smaller than you expect. It only takes 1 item to prove the whole thing to yourself. A growing number of men are running that test right now, 1 item at a time. What they want out of their lives is large. They just want to be the one who picked it. What they're building photographs badly, and it doesn't announce itself at a reunion. It shows up at 54 when the men who did it in order are sitting in a lawyer's office or picking up a second job. And these men still have their money, their skill, their hours, and the ability to say no to anybody who asks something of them. That's the answer they landed on. That's what all of it was for.